Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of the Deep Cover podcast. This week, I kind of wanted to talk about media. I want to talk about media and women specifically in sports media. So, this past week, it was International Women's Day, which is, of course, a big deal, and it's a great time to celebrate all the important women in our lives, right? Whether that is a sibling, a partner, a mother, a parental figure, whatever the case may be. And ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, the most recognizable sports brand here in the United States, with their NBA coverage, decided that they were going to go all in on women for the broadcast, which is awesome. So you had a play-by-play announcer, a color commentator, everybody in the booth for the NBA on ESPN that day were all women. She had the likes of Becky Hammon and Ramona Shelburne, Beth Mowins, all these great personalities to cover the NBA. It was a cool moment, right? But the commentary online quickly shifted. And people saying, oh, I'll have to watch the game on mute. People saying that they felt like the network was shoving women down their throat. And the rhetoric quickly devolved into something that is incredibly sexist, something that is hateful, hurtful, and just overall bad faith commentary, right? So it got me thinking, what is it about women in sports that gets into under people's skin a lot? And after the break, I do talk with Mill from Mill Media and the Big Nick Energy podcast, who she is a prominent sports personality in the space of covering the New York Knicks in the NBA. And she kind of talks a little bit more about her experiences of sexism and the way that she, as a woman, is meant to feel that she doesn't belong talking in the space. And from my own perspective, I always feel that people with this type of commentary confuse me because they have to have some important woman in their life, right? Whether that's a girlfriend or a wife, a mother, a sister, a coworker, a boss, somebody they kind of care about. If you had that person, then why would you make comments about women in that regard on social media? And so when I look at that, and then I also think, and Mill and I touched on this in our interview, is some men might feel threatened, imposed upon, right? And I follow a few different people online who are female content creators. A good example is Gab Gowdy, who works for FanDuel, the sports book. And, she makes content and will put out a take, something about like the Cleveland Browns. She's a Cleveland native, so she's a big fan of the team, right? And you'll see people in the comments demeaning her appearance, telling her not to do sports anymore. And that sort of commentary you don't really see for the men's side of the aisle, right? You might be looking at a male commentator who says something and you're just calling them dumb. You call the take bad. You tag freezing cold takes, whatever you do, right? But you don't start just broad brushing it and demeaning him for existing. And that seems to be the case of what we have with women in sports. And my view has always been the wider reach sports has, the better, right? We don't want it to be like it was in the 60s and 70s in the NBA, where it's just a bunch of gambling men courtside smoking cigars, right? We want a wide variety of people to be fans, like from the dating aspect. It's always a treat, I think, if you as a man who likes sports to find a partner who also likes sports. There's a commonality there. So why wouldn't you want a woman to be that way, right? And it's a confusing situation, but it also, I feel, paints the sort of reality of sexism that we have in the United States. And I always think that it's always elevated in the context of social media because you don't have to have ID verification. You don't have to be yourself. You could be just some random person, some random avatar with a weird name, right? And those are more often than not the people that make those sorts of comments. And because you have that kind of shield behind the screen, that you could just say whatever you want. And I think it's a endemic sort of problem societally, where a lot of women just aren't respected, especially in the context of sports. And for a while, I used to think, well, they might be thinking a woman shouldn't comment because of a lack of playing, right? But then you think about the biggest commentators and personalities in sports media. They didn't play professionally, right? And in my conversation with Mill, we bring up Becky Hammon juxtaposed to somebody like Stephen A. Smith or Michael Wilbon. These are guys who are career journalists, of course, but they didn't play at a professional level. Obviously, notoriously, Stephen A. Smith had a very short stint in college before knee injuries derailed his career, and he pivoted into journalism. You can take a look at somebody like Candace Parker, who has been an MVP of a professional league in the WNBA. Becky Hammon, who has won titles as a coach and also had a long playing career and also coached in the NBA, lest we forget, right? And so if these people can't get respect, it just seems that there's just a fundamental issue with the way that we view women who are in sports. And for a while, it seemed like we were okay after Title IX with the women's sideline reporter. Your Erin Andrews on the sideline, your Pam Oliver on the sideline. But once they started entering the booth, we had a problem with it. Every time Doris Burke does an NBA game, and I disagree with a lot of the analyses that Doris has or some of her stylistically, but I can't deny that she has a knowledge of the game, right? And you'll see comments like, oh, get this woman off my screen, I'm not trying to hear this, and it almost feels like some men feel like women are encroaching in their territory. Like, this is our thing, is like their mentality, right? And it wasn't written in stone that men can only be the ones who are into and watch sports. Same way it wasn't written in stone that only women can be nurses. You have male nurses now, or same thing with doctors and the other way, right? Things evolve and interests evolve, right? And, we are encouraging youth sports so much more, like on the basketball and soccer side especially. And women play those sports. Women now have role models to look up to, right? In basketball, you've had like Diana Taurasi and Maya Moore and Sabrina Ionescu currently, Caitlin Clark, who's about to enter the WNBA. In soccer, you've had Megan Rapinoe, you've had Hope Solo, you've had a bunch of high-level players who are role models to young women. So if you're a young girl and you're watching these athletes and you are inspired by them and you want to be like them. Same way I grew up watching Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and idolizing them, right? Or Kobe Bryant or Allen Iverson, whoever anybody happened to watch and idolize. It's the same concept. So when they develop the passion, they want to start jumping into it and talk about it. Same way I'm here passionately talking to you about sports on a weekly basis. And when they get into the space, it becomes sexually explicit, it becomes demeaning, derogatory, fat shaming, whatever the case may be. It's just incredibly graphic material that really has no place in a good-natured, good faith discussion. And it's a real problem. And I talk with Mill about this, how she got started into creating content and her kind of journey as a passionate sports fan and now content creator. And just kind of her experience, what she's dealt with, how she looks at it. And the overall message that I came away with, and I hope you do too, is that it's really just about being a part of a conversation. The ultimate goal should be, this person had a great take. Not, oh, that's a really good take for a woman. There's always that qualifier, right? And we kind of want to try to eliminate that. And I talked to Mill about that extensively. We also discussed just the overall landscape of media, if big networks are to play in the way that women are viewed in the context of sports. It's an important conversation. I hope you enjoy it. So right after the break, we'll be joined by Mill Media from Big Nick Energy on the Deep Cover podcast. Stay tuned. All right, joining me now on the Deep Cover podcast is one of my favorite social media follows, and really one of my favorite people as a Nick fan. First of all, to watch her content, but I want to welcome to the podcast Mill from Big Nick Energy and a bunch of other great content online is joining me today to have this important conversation about women in sports. But Mill, welcome to the pod, and how are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Sometimes you reach out to a guest and you just say, well, maybe they'll come on, and you hope for the best. And you
Yeah.
were one of those guests. So I do appreciate you giving me the time here to just chat about something that I think is really important. And that's the way that women have gotten into sports and are treated by the general sports watching community, right? We were just talking before we started recording that International Women's Day just passed, so this is kind of a appropriate time to have the conversation. But before we get into that, I kind of want just a little bit about yourself. How did you get into uh, obviously being a fan of sports and then diving into creating content about sports?
Yeah, so I've been a fan of sports pretty much my entire life growing up. My dad was is a huge sports fan, so he got me into it. Always having the Knicks games on, the Giants games, Yankees, Mets, all of that. He would always have those on TV. But really, towards around 7 or 8, that's when I first started becoming. That's when I became a Knicks fan. But I've been a Giants fan. I would say I guess around the similar time
Mhm.
frame, just when I was little, and then
Yeah,
up until now, I'm still a fan. So sports have always been a huge part of my life because you know fandom is a huge thing to me. But it's also like I started playing basketball when I was introduced to it with the Knicks. So I
yeah,
started to play, started to learn how to play, and it was a huge part of my life. Playing in different leagues, playing through the school teams. I still have a lot of love playing as a sport of basketball, but I don't play anymore. Like I've never done professionally. I don't
yeah.
do it like serious anymore. But yeah, and so how I got into media is that somewhere around, I guess, a little bit over a year ago,
Mhm.
I just created an Instagram account, and I really did it sort of as a hobby at first and something for fun to share my opinions on sports teams, specifically New York sports teams that I follow, the Knicks, Giants, Mets, all of those good stuff. And I didn't really think anything serious of it at the time. I didn't even think people were going to watch because, it was a new account that didn't have much followers or a lot of people watching. So I just did it for fun and to connect with more people. But a year later, things have changed, and I've connected with many, many fans, and I've been able to have different opportunities that have really helped me. And now I'm taking this a lot more seriously, being in sports media. Yeah, I definitely want to continue doing this and explore further opportunities in the future.
I will say, as far as you're being very humble about your basketball playing, because I've seen a few videos. The jumper's smooth, Mill. So the jumper's there, and
Yeah, I honestly tell people sometimes if I was just taller,
yeah.
I would have tried my best to get into the
Mhm.
WNBA, but I'm very short, and even the shortest WNBA player is still taller than me. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's just struck out on the genetics lottery there, unfortunately.
yeah.
But you make a good point about just kind of connection with fans and other like-minded people, and specifically like when it comes to like the Knicks and even the Giants to a lesser extent, the rabid fan community is there to allow people to really kind of just dive in. A bunch of people have their podcasts. They had like the Twitter Spaces when it was still called Twitter
Yeah.
thing, and YouTube shows. Obviously, you have the big ones. Obviously, you're part of Big Nick Energy, which is a big one, but you also have like Nick's Fan TV, Nick's Film School, all these great outlets. I think it's a better way to, as a fan, to take coverage in, right? So I guess like what made you decide? So, like on my side, I'm a Knicks fan, Giants fan as well. Grew up in Queens, so we're very similar in that
Yeah.
regard. But I always find it hard to cover the team I'm a fan of because it's just so. the bias is so there, right? You rooting for these guys. Like if Josh Hart has a bad game, I feel bad just ripping him to shreds on a podcast or an article. So I guess like how do you separate the two for you to separate the fandom from just like the journalistic type of analysis of your favorite teams?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, and even now, still, I'm very biased when I do my Knicks takes, and especially if I'm comparing the Knicks to other teams. I mean, I of
Yeah.
course I'm gonna have a little bias towards our Knicks and our star Jalen Brunson. I'll always think that he's better than everyone, but
Yeah.
you're right. Like we have to separate the two between being biased and actual journalism values. And it's tough because I'm a huge fan, so I want to continue showing my fandom and showing my support for them. But that can't always be said, especially when things aren't always looking so great. Whether we're in a losing streak or this player's not performing how they should be, you have to be honest about it. It's the hard truth, but I would say I've done a fairly good job about it. I'm pretty much when certain players, let's say, you just brought it up, they don't perform the best one night, you have to mention it. You
Yeah.
don't just walk around it. It has to be mentioned because it's Big Nick Energy. What I do on their YouTube channel, their post game shows, I have to dive into the game. So
Mhm.
if I just were to ignore it, that wouldn't be the truth, and I wouldn't like to do that. So I try my best to not be too biased. Um, but again, I think I've done a pretty good job calling out players when they need to be called out. And yeah.
Yeah, it's I remember hopping on a couple of Knicks pods a couple years ago, last year and the year before, and I remember I was always kind of super critical of Obi Toppin. And after I would like lay into his performances or whatever, and afterwards I kind of felt bad. I was like, man, I want this guy to do well.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so frustrating, right? I just want him to do well, and then it comes out that way. But you're right. You have to keep it honest, right? And I feel like Knicks fans and Knicks content creators do that better than a lot of other teams. Like I've like smaller market teams like OKC or Charlotte or those type of markets. They'll be like, yeah, but we have him here, so we don't want to ruffle too many feathers. I don't want to say anything bad about Zion and make him demand a trade. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I do want to kind of pivot into uh, entering sports content as a woman, right? And the other day, I just saw a post about ESPN having an all women lineup for their NBA coverage for International Women's Day. And, you know, obviously the comments on these type of posts aren't indicative of the wider, I think, sports public, but there's just a lot of comments like, oh, I'm just going to watch the game on mute. Why are they shoving women down our throat? Stuff. It's like super sexist stuff, right? And for you as a woman in the space and who is like found success and have a good follower account and you have a platform with Big Nick Energy, I guess like why do you think this is the case? Like, do you think that some men just feel like their territory, quote unquote, is getting encroached upon, or just what's your take on that?
Honestly, I wonder the same thing myself sometimes when I see those type of comments. I can't wrap my head around it why so many fans, specifically men, are against women being involved in these sports, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, whichever. I've seen a lot of those comments, like you said, when women are leading whatever, a pregame show or anything, or they're the broadcasters for a game. I've seen so many hurtful comments about it. I truly am not sure why. It could be how people are raised. Um, I was raised to not think that there's a difference really, and that
Mhm.
my dad raised me to think that I could do whatever I want.
Right.
And as a woman, there shouldn't be a divide there. But people, what they might live somewhere where it's not like that, where only men maybe play sports in that state, or I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's really the case that much anymore, but still,
Mhm.
it's all about people's values, really, how they value women.
Yeah.
Because if you respect us, you'll respect us being involved in the NBA, any sport, really, any league. Obviously, we're not playing in the league, but we still want to be included. I'm a fan of sports, specifically men's sports,
Mhm.
but I would like to have a say in it too. just because I'm not a man, I think
Mhm.
I could still have a say in it and have an opinion on it.
The irony is, with like football coverage for the longest time, like everybody would say, well, there really is no avenue for women to play the game, right? But in
Oh yeah,
basketball, that's really not the case,
yeah,
So the argument's kind of really flawed because I'll use Becky Hammon as an example. Obviously, coach of the Aces in the WNBA, a very long tenured WNBA career as well. So she knows basketball, right? There's no
yeah,
doubt,
yeah,
and people will discredit her opinion, or even somebody like Candace Parker who's actively playing in the WNBA. But then you're watching guys like Mike Wilbon or Stephen A. Smith or say whatever, guys who never played at that high of a level, for whatever reason, but they are respected journalists. But so I kind of look at that as kind of like a thing where a lot of men might have been comfortable with women on the sideline, your Aaron Andrews style sideline
yeah,
reporter. But once you get them in the booth, they all of a sudden have a problem. And what's always been fascinating to me, like one of my favorite League Pass broadcast teams is the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, outside of the Knicks, I think have one of the best ones in the league. But the Kings have, the one of their rotation, they have like a couple women who come through and they offer excellent analysis. And I think we've kind of learned over the years that if you're passionate about the game, you could study the game and know about it. But it seems like it defaults to this whole she could never understand. And we have more and more women coaches, trainers. So it seems like there's a huge disconnect. Um, I guess, what sort of experiences have you had, on your own content with this sort of dynamic kind of unfolding?
yeah. I've definitely experienced it as well, not to the degree that these women in that are actually being on national television get it,
Mm,
but still, I do experience it on social media. Even today, I was telling you that I posted a video last night talking about the Knicks specifically. I was talking about a player's performance, and for some reason, it caught a lot of people's attention and a lot of negative comments that were sexist, basically. And
mm,
I remember one specifically said, "The WNB, this is not." I don't know what it was. Something like go to the WNBA channel, not
mm,
don't watch Knicks games, basically.
mm,
So I just I I try not to think too hard about those comments because like
right.
I know that I'm a big Knicks fan. Like
Mhm,
you can't question my fandom, you can't question my knowledge because I watch pretty much every game,
yeah.
and I that's why I don't take those comments too seriously. But it's like I want to call them out so bad and say like I can watch both. I can watch WNBA, I can watch NBA. It shouldn't matter. And um like I don't have a problem with people calling me out or
Mhm,
disagreeing with me, but it's another thing when you feel the need to mention that I'm a woman when you're calling me out and say women don't know what they're talking about. Like that's a different level that I don't like to see at all. Like go ahead, disagree with me, tell me why I'm wrong, but don't bring up that I'm a woman because it just sets us back really to have to see that over and over. I don't enjoy it, but it happens. It's gonna continue happening. I think it's definitely gone down because um, over time I think women will definitely feel more equal as time progresses and we get more opportunities and more involved. Like we saw what Sabrina did in the All-Star weekend. That was
mhm,
great. And it honestly, I think, it caught a lot of people's attention and she gained a lot of new fans that night.
yep,
Maybe little boys, guys that never watched WNB before or never knew who she was, but maybe they did, maybe they'll watch her this season and
mhm.
they'll pay attention to it. So I think that the comments are rough and they're not easy to deal with. I said, I tweeted it on X. I said, shout out to all the women fans out there, women sports fans. We have to deal with a lot of sexist stuff and a lot of BS just to support our team, just to defend our team. It's not easy, but we do it because we love our teams and we have a lot of pride in our teams.
Yeah, I think about the whole like, oh, stick to the WNBA, or get out of the lane here, and I'm just like, well, two things come to my mind. First of all, my thought has always been, if you have any woman that's important to you in your life, right, sister, partner, mother, aunt, whatever, grandmother, you shouldn't be saying stuff like that, right? Because it's like, would you, if your mother started to get into something, would you say, well, you're not allowed to watch this? This is like men's territory or
Yeah,
something? And furthermore, it's like, why wouldn't you want more people to be a fan of your team? Like, more fans is good. More people
exactly.
following your team is a good thing. So that's just kind of something I never personally understood. If you're a fan and you could talk about it, then let somebody talk about it, right? And it smacks me of just like in the 50s in baseball, where obviously it was the middle of the civil rights era and everything. And, the way black people were treated at doing just the most mundane things, such as watching a baseball game, was just, incredibly toxic. And it feels like that is what women are encountering now as they get more into and involved with it. And you brought up Sabrina Ionescu. The signature shoe situation there is also kind of developing stuff. Like her, Elena Deladon, and a few others have some signature shoes now through Nike, which look awesome. Better than a new pair of LeBrons. So yeah, I think that that's important. But when we kind of focus in on just bigger media outlets, your Fox Sports, your ESPNs, those type of people. Do you think that they've positioned women in the way that they give them assignments? Does that kind of hurt the perception of women in sports to fans? Like, think about the fact that on a debate show, a woman's always the moderator, never the debater. On a pregame show, they're always queuing up the topic and not analyzing the topic. Do you think that kind of atypical big network setup has kind of been detrimental to women breaking in through the space?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And the point you just brought up, having a woman as a moderator, let's say in a debate, I just think that we should have women in the debate as well. Um, I think that there's certain, like, I think it's fine if a woman wants to be a moderator, but we should also include them in different opportunities, like if they want to be in that debate too. And yeah, I've just seen. I think it's getting better
Mhm.
because we see now. You mentioned Candace Parker, and she, when she's on her show with Kendrick Perkins and everyone that's on that panel, I've seen her give a lot of takes before, and um, I don't want to say they, the one take. I don't know if you saw that one take
The
about
Brunson
Jalen.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I can't praise that take,
Yeah, of course.
but I would like for her to know what she is specifically talking about. That's another thing that could be detrimental to women in media, is that if we mess up one time, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of us.
Yeah,
And
not a level playing field, right? Like
yeah,
like I said, Kendrick Perkins, to use your example, has made countless bad prognostications, right?
yeah,
No one really gets at it. It's like, oh, that's just big perk, and but Candace does is like, how do you let this woman on television? She doesn't know what she's talking about. They did the same thing to Becky Hammond when she
yeah,
also made another Jalen Brunson comment. It just seems like national media just doesn't like Jalen Brunson. I think that's the real issue. But
yeah. That might be the real issue, because as a Knicks fan, I didn't agree with what they said, and I didn't think that was the
course, yeah.
truth. So when they say things that aren't truthful, or it definitely sets us back as well. And we need to get the right people in there, the people with the right qualifications. Um, but again, you just said, like, Kendrick Perkins, like, everyone's going to be wrong about something. It doesn't matter who it is, a woman or a man, they're going to be wrong about something. I think owning up to it is what should definitely happen, especially for her. But I do think that the way they position women in national television, bigger outlets of media, should be different. I want to see a sports fan that's a woman go on a rant like Stephen A does.
Mhm.
We haven't really seen someone. I mean, there's a few I could think of that come to mind. She's what, I forgot her name. I think she's on the radio, and she pretty much talks about New York sports, I believe. I don't know. Do you know any women radio hosts that are
Ooh,
talk
put
about
me
New
on the
York
spot,
sports?
Bill. I cannot
Yeah,
think of any
her
offhand. No.
name is like literally at the the top of my head. I can't think of it, but I've listened to her radio show,
Mhm.
and when I think of the name, I will mention her. She does a great radio show, and she's someone I look up to so much because she goes on those rants. I have to remember her
No,
name so I can.
someone that now you got my brain thinking is now I think she's based on the West Coast and she covers like broader NBA, but like
Yeah,
Trista Crick is somebody that I follow and she does that on her podcast, right? She rants a lot and I think that's a good thing because it's like the playing field feels like it's not level, right? Where you're allowing Stephen A to kind of just fly off the handle, and I keep on bringing him up because he's the first person that most people
yeah,
think of. You know, even like Shannon Sharp when he was like doing Undisputed with Skip Bayless, flying off the handle, getting loud, whatever. And but if you're like a woman, they would kind of judge you in a different light. You know, when the guy does it, oh, he's just super fired up and passionate. When the woman does it, like, oh, what's her problem, right?
yeah,
And it's a double standard,
definitely.
you know. And I think you could trace that back from a societal perspective. And what ends up happening is women, you mentioned the sexist comments. A lot of times, that can devolve into threats. That can devolve into sexually explicit type of content. You think about back Aaron Andrews when the whole hotel taping thing happened, and I think women become in the limelight there and are kind of targets. So I guess talk to me. Do you think that that's a real, like a very prominent issue? And if so, like, what do you think is the root cause of people stooping down to that level to make those sort of comments?
Yeah, before I dive into that, I just wanted to say the radio host I was referring to was Anita Marks,
Ah,
and
okay, okay,
I my dad primarily listens to her
okay.
whenever he's driving. So whenever I'm in the car with him, I always hear her, and she does great shows. But
Okay.
going back to what you said, uh, is it why people make those comments and why this
Yeah.
do?
So why did like when somebody when a man makes a back, like let's say a guy I listen to, Colin Coward, he's right sometimes, he's wrong a lot of times too, right? And when he's wrong, people say, "Oh, Coward, you idiot," blah blah blah. Well, flip that on and say a woman does that, and it turns sexually graphic, it turns violent, it turns just the ugliest thing you could imagine in society. That's what it turns. So why do you think that people just jump to that? as opposed to as opposed to the way they do it with male commentators.
I honestly feel like they feel like they have power over us in some
Mm,
way, and they like to target women. They think they're funny with whatever jokes they come up with, whether it's something sexual or something like that.
mhm,
They think that everyone's gonna like their joke, and that's not the case. It's just inappropriate. It's not okay for them to be targeting women like that and leaving hateful comments like that under women's posts when you won't target and single out a guy like that. You
mhm.
see a guy's video, and let's say you don't like it, you continue to keep scrolling. But when you see a woman's video you don't like, why do you feel the need to leave hateful comments under it? I really don't understand it. It honestly just feels like they want to single us out. They want to single us out because they don't want us in their world. They don't want us to be a
Mm.
part of their interests, what they like to. So maybe they feel that the more times they single us out and leave those hateful comments, that we won't be sports fans anymore and that they can have sports to themselves.
So I
Honestly,
guess a
yeah.
bigger question there then is why do you think that so many men then have a feeling of ownership over sports fandom, right? Like no, this is my thing, right? Like why do you think that is?
Um, honestly, part of me wants to say it's just in the DNA
Mm,
because you go back to prehistoric times, men have always been more dominant and they've always had
mm,
more power over anyone, especially um, women in that time. Women were caretakers,
yeah.
they cooked, they washed clothes, they cleaned everything. So
Mm,
I don't know. I feel like a part of it is the history
mm,
and how I don't know if it's in men's DNA to feel that way because I mean, you understand it. You understand what we
mm.
go through. So it's not everyone, but I
Right, of
think
course.
what I was mentioning earlier is that how you're raised is a huge part of it. If you're raised and your parents teach you like there should be no difference, but there should be no hate towards women, um, and there shouldn't really be a divide there. So I think it's all about how you're raised as well and where you grow up. A lot of places aren't that diverse, where you'll see a lot of girls basketball teams or women in sports at all. So it really depends on the environment, the history, everything.
I guess to kind of wrap this up, do you think that there is a long-term solution to this problem? You know, obviously, I think in again, we both cover basketball pretty extensively, so I've kind of been sticking to basketball with this, but it is also the case in football as well. But I mean, do you think that the integration of more like the WNBA crossover is kind of helping? Because I feel like NBA players love the WNBA and they love women basketball players, and they never have had a problem with a woman coach or answering questions from a sideline reporter or anything like that. So, I mean, what do you think is like the solution to this problem?
I would say, like, I'm giving advice to people who are hateful now, men who are
Mm,
hateful towards women in sports and hate on women leagues, whether that's WNBA, etc.
mm,
My advice to you is that if you don't like it, you don't have to say anything about it. Straight
right.
up, if you feel some type of way about it that's going to be hateful and rude and inappropriate, you really don't have to say anything about it. You don't have to leave comments about it. Just keep scrolling. No one's forcing you to watch anything. Um, women WNBA is promoted a lot by the NBA.
Yep.
And that's for the sake of the WNBA. We want to reach more viewers, but if you're not the person they're trying to reach who is not interested at all, just ignore it. You don't have to watch it. A lot of people act like it's super hard to just keep scrolling and to just ignore it, but it's not. Like, no one's sitting you down and forcing you to watch a WNBA game. The NBA is promoting the WNBA to reach more people that they think will be interested. I mean, there's a lot of people I've talked to recently within this past year that weren't interested in it before, but because of all of the marketing and the things that the WNBA does with the NBA, they're interested now and they're going to check it
Mhm.
out, when the season starts up again this, in a few months. But literally, they're that's what I can say to people that are hateful. And then also, if you want to be supportive, if you want to be supportive of women in sports, I would say that's great. We love the support. Um, all kind messages are appreciated, but we also just want to be treated like any other person,
Mhm.
male or female. We want to be treated like someone who just knows sports. I've gotten some comments before that have been like, wow, like a woman that knows her stuff or a woman in sports, that's cool, that's rare. I get your intentions with that, but it's also like, I don't want you to single me out just because I'm a woman that is talking about sports. I want you to treat me like a person who knows sports, not because I'm a woman you have to call it out. But I know those comments are with good intention.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that if you want to be supportive, continue to watch women in sports and just watch what you say. Really watch how you say things. If you don't agree with someone, like, let's say the Candace Parker comments, the Becky Hammond comments, that's fine. You don't agree with them. I didn't agree with them, but we don't have to resort to inappropriate things being said about them, name calling, very hateful remarks because they're women. We don't have to do that at all.
Yeah, and that's incredibly well said. And I think the goal should be to eventually get to a point where this person said something
Yeah,
super
exactly.
insightful, right? As opposed to like, oh wow, a woman said that. That's cool. Like that's kind of demeaning, right? It's just like, well, you're almost like talking down. Like it's a tone of surprise. It's like, oh, she actually knows stuff, and we need to get past that. Mill, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk about this subject with me. Obviously, anything you wanted to plug where people could follow you and check out all your great content.
Of course, thank you so much for having me on today. It was super important to talk about what we did. And, hopefully this conversation can get across more people, whether that's someone who doesn't want women to be involved, and hopefully they could take my advice, or someone, a young woman who, like me, who's interested in getting into the sports media. Um, there's going to be a lot of hate, is what I can say, but times are changing. And it's all thanks to people like you who are ready to start the conversation.
Much appreciated. Make sure you guys check out Mill on all social platforms at Mill Media, Threads, Instagram, X, YouTube with Big Nick Energy. Great post-game analysis. Definitely want to check that out as the Knicks hit the stretch run to get into the playoffs. Mill, thanks again for hopping on. And everybody else, we will catch you all next time.